welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 444, and today's date is August 18th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Central Bankers' U.S. Government Agenda for the People of America, Martial Law. And we're going to get into that a little bit later in this report, but before I get started, I just want to welcome all those new subscribers on YouTube. If you have not visited the X22Report.com site, come on down. I do have a tab under Resources called Map of Ebola, Map of Illegal Immigrants. It shows you where the infected areas are, where the people are infected around the world. I also have a map of where the illegals are being dropped off in the United States. Also, we have The People. This is a forum of like-minded people talking about the economic collapse and many other issues. It is completely free to join. You can read what everyone is saying. You can look at all the topics. You do not have to sign up if you're hesitant about doing so. And once you get used to it and you see what people are talking about, you can go ahead and sign up. And you just use an everyday username and an email address just to confirm that you signed up, and that's all you need. You can just have, and then you can upload your avatar picture, the way whatever you want to put up there. And it is completely free, and it's just everyone getting together from all over the world talking about what is happening here. And I also have other things on the X22Report.com site. I put up Sentinel alerts every single day. A lot of times I comment on what's been going on. And of course, you can listen to the audio version of the report on the site. There is no video. It's an MP3. So if you wanted to download it to your iPad, your Android, your iPhone, you can do that and you can listen to it. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we're seeing out in the UK that home prices pretty much imploded on themselves. London home prices fell in August by 5.9%, the plunge, the biggest since December of 2007. And this is the second biggest drop on record. So, like I said before, Europe, UK, Germany, Australia, Canada, it's like a domino effect. It starts with the other nations first, like Greece, Cyprus, Portugal, Italy, Spain, and it spreads outward. And the collapse is hitting more and more of these countries. We see things turning towards the bad, not the good, and it's going to get worse as time goes on. Now, here in the United States, what we're seeing, of course, we understand that the unemployment numbers are completely manipulated, fake, phony, false, and we know that the unemployment numbers are very close to 30%. And of course, there's other people who've been doing other calculations, and they're telling us that it could even be as high as 37%. And we know the youth unemployment is almost up to 50%. Now, that is very important because the youth of America, those kids coming out of college, those kids coming out of high school, this is the next generation. And if they can't get good jobs where they can save money, use this money to go to the retail stores or to purchase online, or to purchase automobiles and to save for a house, we are in very big trouble. And this is what we're seeing because 80% of these college graduates who are going to school for something very specific cannot find that job in their major. They can find part-time jobs, or some can't even find jobs at all. And this is why the government has come down and pretty much modified their student loans to try to help them out, because they realize and they know they can't find work, and they don't want everyone defaulting all at once on these loans. And of course, you really can't get rid of the student loans. They follow you for life. So once you're sucked into this, that's pretty much it, and you have to pay it off. But what they're reporting on here is that unemployment is rising in 30 U.S. states last month. Now, of course, they're using the propaganda because, oh, more jobs are being opened up and now more people are starting to look, and this is why unemployment is going up. No, unemployment is going up. It's because people can't find work, and there is a huge amount of layoffs that have been happening since the beginning of this year. And as we slide into fall, there's going to be even more layoffs. Now, what's very interesting, and we've said this many times, we go back to 2008 where a lot of people lost their material wealth because their retirement funds, their homes, so they lost a lot of their savings, their retirement, their investment in real estate. And what we're seeing now, there's a report that came out that a third of the people, 36% in the U.S., have nothing saved for retirement, and what we're also seeing is that 14% of people ages 65 and older have no retirement savings. 26 of those 50 to 64, 26% of those 50 to 64 don't have anything. 33% from 30 to 49 don't have anything, and 69% from 18 years old to 29 years old have absolutely no retirement. So this is not a good mixture for the future whatsoever. We can see that this is going to have a huge effect as we go further into this collapse scenario. I mean, it's really building up right now. I mean, I feel it I report on it every day, but I really do feel it every single day when I look around and I see what's happening in many of the stores, what's happening in real estate, what's going on with friends and family where all of a sudden someone loses a job and they can't find one. And I'm starting to realize, and people who have been writing into me saying that, listen, it's very tough out there, and it's not as great as the corporate media and the government's making it out to be. And we all know this. We all know that what they're telling us is completely manipulated, and the real indicator of what's happening is something terrible. It's a collapse of the entire system, and everyone's going to wake up when the system comes down, almost like in 2008, where everyone went about their merrily way, oh, look, everything's great, everything's lollipops, candy, balloons, and all of a sudden the market fell apart and no one could understand what was going on. Everyone thought they had a secure job, everything was great, they had their house, and all of a sudden you saw houses being abandoned, you saw people walking out of Lehman with boxes and other major companies. And we saw this happen to many people. And this time, since the wealth has completely disappeared, this time it's going to be much worse. And of course, as we know, the Fed has been buying foreclosed homes, toxic real estate. It's all on their books. They've been pumping money into the system to keep it propped up. And we know that this is completely fake, phony, and false. Now, it looks like home builder sentiment jumps to highest in January, but you have to remember, just because somebody's hoping for something, it doesn't mean it happens. I mean, this is coming from the National Association of Home Builders, where their sentiment printed about 55, beating expectations of 53. But when you look at the big picture, yes, they have a huge amount of hope, and they're hoping that things are going to get better because the corporate media is telling them this, the Fed is telling them this, the United States government is telling them this. But when you really look at it, mortgage applications are imploding on themselves. I mean, mortgage departments are closing, laying off people. People are not going out taking out mortgages. Home sales are on a downward trend. Home prices are starting to fall. And we can see right now that all of this propaganda coming out that real estate's going to really swing back, after the winter months, we all knew this wasn't going to happen. And all of a sudden now Fannie Mae is out there and they're saying, you know what, for the rest of 2014 and most likely 2015, the housing market is not going to do well. We currently estimate that 2014 will finish lower in total sales figures than 2013, and 2015 most likely will be worse than 2014. So why are they saying this all of a sudden? Well, they're saying it's because of those winter months in the first quarter. We lost the momentum, and people just couldn't, get themselves going to sell those houses and to buy those houses, which is absolutely ridiculous. We already know, and they already know, and I'm talking about they, the U.S. government, Federal Reserve, central bankers, they already knew that they couldn't keep this system going. And this is why we saw a huge amount of people being laid off in mortgage departments and a lot of mortgage companies closing. I mean, here's another one. Nation Star Mortgage laying off 90 people. Now, if we go backwards in time and we go back to August of 2013, we had Wells Fargo, Citibank, Bank of America laying off thousands upon thousands of people. And this went all throughout 2013 into 2014 where we are now. And they're still closing and laying off people in mortgage departments and mortgage companies. It's still happening. It's nonstop. And we can see right now that we're coming out of the summer months, and when September, October, November hits, real estate is going to take a huge dive. I went out on Zillow. I don't know if you've ever seen Zillow. It gives you a nice overview of what's been happening in the industry. And you can see different neighborhoods in different areas of the country. Now, every neighborhood is not the same, and I know a lot of people write in saying, oh, in my area it's fantastic, everything looks great. Yes, we've seen this before back in 2008. I lived in New York. My sister-in-law lived in Florida. Traffic completely dried up in New York. I was trying to sell my house during this time period, back in 2007 actually, and it just dried up. In Florida, I called down there, and they said, no, everything's fine. It's unbelievable. People just coming in left and right. We can't even keep up with the demand. And then guess what happened? 6 to 8 months later, it completely dried up in Florida. It completely dried up in many different areas. And this is what we're seeing right now. In New York, in the northeast sections, in certain areas, we're seeing absolutely no traffic whatsoever. Actually, I'm seeing people with their homes on the market for like 60, 90, and 120 days, and they're continually lowering the prices. We're seeing this out west. We're seeing it in the south, and eventually this will spread across the rest of the country because it will ramp up, and we can see already that Fannie Mae is saying, you know what, real estate's not going to bounce back at this time. Now, we know the situation in Ferguson is continuing, and it's getting worse. It is really not getting better. And we've found that the Missouri police kind of lied about what was going on there because they said, no, we're not using tear gas on the people whatsoever. But reporters found canisters on the ground, and they say, what are these? And they say, yeah, we might have shot some tear gas canisters out there. And then we see some more videos, and yes, they have used tear gas. Now, I don't know if you saw this, but there's a video circulating about what has been happening in Ferguson, about the rioting, and it seems like a East Ukrainian militia serviceman, Igor Strelkov, who was in the Ukraine's Donetsk region, appeared in this video in the rioting. Now, of course, someone CGI'd this person in there. The lighting's all wrong. You could tell it's completely fake. But it's very interesting how they did this, and they planted it out on the internet, and it went, you know, a lot of people seen it thinking that, Russia's planting spies in Ferguson trying to create riots within America, and it's just another propaganda piece. And again, this has been debunked. The lighting's all wrong. This person is not in Ferguson, and it's almost like what they did with all the other movies with Clint Eastwood and other people where they show them with presidents like John F. Kennedy, and they show them in the background behind someone. It's the same exact thing. It is completely fake. It is a propaganda trick. Now, it looks like U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder on Sunday ordered a federal medical examiner to perform another autopsy, and it looks like the Brown family decided to have Dr. Michael Baden do a autopsy, a private autopsy, and it looks like the shots that entered Michael Brown came in from the front. There was one to the head, couple to the arm, and into the body, and nothing was shot into the back. Actually, it was all coming from the front. So one or two scenarios here. Either he was down on his knees with his hands up facing the police, or he was charging the police car. But it doesn't really matter because the police officer killed this man in cold blood with no reason whatsoever at this time. And I know there's a video out there saying, oh, he was a strong-arm robbery. Why do you think they put that out the same time they mentioned the police officer's name? It's to distract everyone. And I looked at the video, and I mentioned this before. I am not seeing what they're seeing. We don't hear the sound. We don't know what was really going on there. And they put this out there just to make it seem like, oh, yes, he was part of a robbery. But then again, if they all knew this for 6 days, why didn't they arrest his friend to say he was an accessory? None of this happened. So you could tell this was a complete distraction type of video that they were putting out there. Now, since this incident in Ferguson has been heating up and we're seeing more riots and there's now a curfew, we see now that the kill switch debate is starting to heat up. Now, we understand that in California there's a bill to place a kill switch on every smartphone. This way, officials can just throw a switch and the phone dies. And of course they're saying this, the reason for this is to stop all the robbery of cell phones. The United States government also has a bill in the Congress right now circulating about a kill switch for the entire country. And what the tech and civil liberties groups are pushing about is that if there was a kill switch, everything that we've been seeing in Ferguson, we would not be seeing, because all the cell phones would have been shut off by the authorities, and they're saying this is the real reason why they want the kill switch. And of course, we knew this from before. We knew they wanted a way to stop people from taking pictures and transmitting them because it messes up their story. Now, it looks like the governor of Missouri has called out the National Guard, and he had an executive order 14-09, and he put in, it's a state of emergency, was declared on August 16, 2014 due to civil unrest. Conditions of distress and hazard to the safety and welfare and property of the citizens of the community. Additional resources of the state of Missouri are needed. So it looks like the National Guard is coming in, and they are getting prepared to do so. Now, they're also saying that they're going to halt the curfew because the National Guard is coming in, and they're going to take control of the situation. Of course, we have Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton down there, Eric Holder in the area, pushing the propaganda, continually having everyone riot, and it really seems like things are getting way out of hand there, and this is exactly what they want. Now, the mayor was out there, and I reported this on Saturday, saying that, most of the people that were rioting, they're like out-of-towners, and of course, this is what they do. They bring in agent provocateurs to get everything riled up and everyone going, and of course, we see what's happening here. We have the police in fatigues roaming around the city. They don't care who they hit. They don't care what they're doing. I mean, they're attacking reporters. Now, again, why is this all happening? This is a conditioning process to get the people used to this type of police action, that this is how it's going to be. And now they're trying to continually keep this going, and they're hoping that this spreads across the country. Now, we've seen things happen in New York already, where police were out there in Times Square trying to keep the protesters at bay, and things really got out of hand there over the weekend, and we can see that this is happening in other cities at this point. Now, their whole agenda is to get this widespread and throughout the country. And you have to remember, we have DHS where they put out a report saying they are preparing for violence, for civil unrest. And now there's pretty much a new document out there, and this is the new Army Manual, ATP 3-39.33. And this provides discussion and techniques about civil disturbances and crowd control operations that occur in the continental United States. This document, just published this past Friday, promises to change the way the authorities deal with protesters, even peaceful ones. The consequences of the ATP 39.33 could prove deadly for protesters. Now, on the surface, the Posse Comitatus Act, which is 18 U.S.C. 1385, should prevent the Army from deploying the troops in the midst of a protest that is not on the scale of something like the 1992 L.A. riots. However, the Army claims exemption from the rule, stating that 10 U.S.C. 331, when a state is unable to control domestic violence and they have requested federal assistance, the use of the militia or armed forces is authorized. And in 332, when ordinary enforcement means are unworkable due to unlawful obstruction or rebellion against the authority of the United States, use of the militia or armed forces is authorized. 333, when a state cannot or will not protect the constitutional rights of the citizens due to domestic violence or conspiracy to hinder execution of state or federal law, the use of the militia or armed forces is authorized. House Joint Resolution 1292, this resolution directs all departments of the U.S. government, upon request of the Secret Service, to assist in carrying out its statutory duties to protect government officials and major political candidates from physical harm. Now, in 10 U.S.C. 332, the phrase unlawful obstructions or rebellion against the authority of the United States, use of the militia or armed forces is authorized. This permits the federal government from being demonstrated against an act of demonstration or the most benign demonstration of civil disobedience, gives the government the authority to take deadly action against the public, because there are no clear distinctions on when the use of lethal and non-lethal force is appropriate. House Resolution 1292 claims any protest which makes a public official feel threatened would be illegal and subject to intervention by the U.S. Army. Now let's take an example. Say 50 to 100 people decide to gather outside one of these senators' houses. Basically, what would happen, this would trigger a violent response by the Army. If the senators say, "Oh, I feel threatened," the Army can come in, and that's what that means. And thank you to the Common Sense Show for digging this out and presenting it to everyone. Okay, now it seems that gunmen have attacked the Saudi prince in Paris. A motorcade of Saudi prince was attacked in Paris by Kalashnikov-wielding gunmen. The attackers stole 250,000 euros in cash and, more crucially, sensitive documents. Now, what were in those documents, we don't know. But what's very interesting is that they had to point out that it was Kalashnikov-wielding gunmen. And, of course, when you hear this, what do you think of? Russia. And it seems like they're building this up. Now, why did they leave the Saudi prince alive? Why did they just take the documents and the cash, but not do anything to the Saudi prince? Very interesting. It seems like this was completely planned for some other reason. Now, it looks like in Afghanistan, and as we know, the president was out there telling us that we're going to be removing our troops. And, of course, John Kerry's in there trying to fix the elections to get a president in there so they'll sign the bilateral security agreement so troops can stay in Afghanistan. And, of course, we know how the playbook goes with the United States central bankers. They use terror to make the governments think that the United States armed forces are needed. And what we're seeing right now coming out of Pakistani intelligence agencies, that they are looking to destabilize Afghanistan. So it looks like what's happening is they're going to use terror inside of Afghanistan to try to destabilize what has been going on there and hopefully get the U.S. Army back into Afghanistan. And we can see this is what's happening in Iraq right now. It's the same playbook, same thing they're using in Ukraine, same thing they're using in Africa right now. Now, Russia is going to demand the UN report on Malaysian Boeing crash investigation, and the investigation team, which really didn't spend that much time at the crash site because there was so much shelling, it was not safe, and of course Kiev wanted it this way. But Russia says they want the document. Churkin said it had been a month since the start of the probe, and paragraph 13 of the resolution envisions periodical reports by the UN Secretary General on the progress of the investigation, and they want some information, and they're not following the procedures right now. Now, it looks like they were using, the Kiev puppet government was using chemical weapons on the Donetsk and Lugansk people, and it looks like they've captured some footage of them using this. They also have evidence and dirt and soil samples. And again, we have to remember, these central bankers will do everything and anything. They do not care about the people's rights. They will do what they have to do to get control of the situation. If they have to kill every single person, so be it. That is exactly what they will do. Now, Poroshenko is out there, and he signed a law today that expands the powers of the police in what the country calls the anti-terrorist operations. The document gives the right to law enforcement to apply without warning measures of physical effect, special means, and firearms against persons who are recognized terrorists under the law of Ukraine. Wow. So basically, they'll be coming down on anyone that they decide is a terrorist. And how do they decide? They just do this: you're a terrorist. It's almost like here in the United States with the NDAA. Oh, we deem that you're a terrorist. Now you can be taken in, put under arrest, put into jail for 1 year without due process. And this is exactly what's going on in Ukraine right now. They're expanding this because things are really getting out of hand. The government there is collapsing. The currency is collapsing. People are not getting gas. They will not have heat this winter. The entire system is falling apart there. And all the bankers are doing are raping the country of their natural resources, putting the country further and further into debt. Now, Merkel is out there, and she calls for reinforcing the Baltic defenses, and she said we can guarantee that if Latvia gets into a difficult situation, it will get direct support from NATO. The Baltic region defense infrastructure should be reinforced in connection with the situation in Ukraine, and that's coming from Angela Merkel. NATO right now is looking to implore the leaders of its member states to approve the long-term deployment of troops to Eastern Europe during its September summit in Wales. Now, they want to keep these troops there. Of course, what for? World War III. And we can see this is all starting to build up. Now, Breedlove is out there, and he's the commander of the NATO forces, and he's saying that the military response will be required if Moscow secretly send personnel with or without Russian military uniforms into a member state as it did during the takeover of Crimea. But you have to remember, Ukraine is not part of NATO right now. If NATO sees foreign forces infiltrating its sovereign territory, and if we can prove it comes from an aggressor nation, then that's Article 5. General Philip Breedlove said that means a military response to the actions of the aggressor. Therefore, we have to expand the internal national capabilities to identify such a move and to deal with it. Article 5, the linchpin of the alliance founding treaty, ensures that an attack on one member demands a collective response from all. And you can see they are building this up, and they're pushing the propaganda. And of course, I like the part where it says once they prove it. Well, so far, NATO, United States central bankers, Ukraine, they haven't proved anything. All we see coming out of all these three are lies. So they're not going to prove anything. They're going to use propaganda to say, yes, they invaded. Now, it looks like the people in Yemen are planning massive anti-government protests, and we understand that the tribes are rising up in Yemen, and the government is sweating right now because they see what's happening in Libya, they see what's happening in Lebanon, they see what's happening in Iraq, and more protests are coming, and the people are angry. And right now in Yemen, it's very difficult. They've raised the taxes on fuel, and they have a lot of blackouts. They have their country is falling apart. Of course, as soon as the central bankers, U.S. government come in, take over a country, the country completely falls apart. And we see this in every single area. And right now, they're saying that we're going to erect tents, we're going to carry out sit-ins, we're going to organize marches, and we want the government to do what we want. And we also have the same thing happening in Yemen, where the tribes are rising up, and we have fighting going on, we have protests going on. They want the government out of Yemen. Now, in Libya, it seems like there was unidentified warplanes which bombed the tribes inside Libya. Now, they don't know where they came from. People were reporting in Tripoli saying, yes, planes targeted bases of different tribes, and the residents of Tripoli said they heard several jets flying after midnight, followed by loud explosions. Now, was this the United States that took a little detour and went into Libya, bombed, and then came back? Or was this part of Israel? Or was this part of Egypt or another country that got involved in Libya? Right now, we don't know, but we can see someone is out there helping the government of Libya. And you have to remember, the tribes almost have the entire country. The government is just a shell of nothing, not even in the parliament building, still calling out for international help, and all of a sudden we had unidentified warplanes coming in, bombing different locations. Now, in Iraq, we definitely see mission creep here. We see the Obama, where they came in to help the Yazidis on the mountain, and have found out that they weren't even on the mountain. Some of them actually lived there, but they were removed like a day before this even happened, and of course the Pentagon backed off after they found out like there was no one up there to save. This was all propaganda. This was the cover story they used to get the bombing in place in Iraq, to get the military in there, and we can see this is continuing right now, and it's not stopping. And the U.S. troops are going to pretty much be deployed to Fallujah in that area, and we can see that this is not stopping. The bombings, the planes are continuing inside Iraq. And what's also very interesting, the Yazidis are reporting that it wasn't the Islamic State that was pretty much doing all the atrocities. It was their Arab neighbors that were doing this. So we can see right now this whole ginned up story of Islamic State doing all of these things is just that. The tribes of the people in Iraq are rising up. Yes, we have the Islamic State in there, and this is controlled by the United States government, UK, Israel, other Arab nations, to push this agenda really, really hard. And of course, the United States was out here putting sanctions on the Islamic State like they really, it's absolutely meaningless. It's a show for everyone. Remember, the playbook of the United States government central bankers is to use terror in the country to get troops in there, and this is exactly what we're seeing. Now, the United States has approved a project to sustain the Iraq Air Force. Of course, Maliki has stepped down. There's also reports that Maliki is bringing in armament and planning something, but we'll have to see if this pans out or not, and this is propaganda. But there are stories circulating about this, and we can see right now that President Barack Obama approved an Iraqi request for about $500 million program to train and maintain Baghdad's Air Force. Of course, they're getting a new prime minister in there, and before you know it, we will have boots on the ground inside of Iraq. Now, it looks like Assad is really hitting the Islamic State really hard inside of Syria. And, of course, this is all part of the United States government, Israel, UK, other private Western central bank countries, because you have to remember, all of this is connected. The Islamic State was put into Iraq right now to create chaos because the United States has tried for many, many years to get into Syria and remove Assad. And they had reports, which I did, where they're saying that Assad is working with the Islamic State, and then here we are that Assad is now bombing the Islamic State. So again, they're trying to build the propaganda. But what's very interesting is that the Islamic State is going to be maneuvering, and they're going to try to get throughout the Middle East and into Africa. The Islamic State is looking to control over large parts of Iraq, Syria, and also northern Africa. The Islamic State sources said that ISIL has intensified recruiting in several countries in North Africa. They said the recruitment was now meant to help establish sleeper and operational cells in such countries as Algeria, Libya, Morocco, and Tunisia, and Lebanon. So we can see and Yemen, and we can see what is happening right now is they are maneuvering because the United States will bring in boots on the ground, will bring in the Air Force to all of these countries because they're going to follow the Islamic State because there's terror in each one of these countries. Over the last 2 months or so, the direction has been changing. And ISIL also wants to establish an infrastructure in North Africa. ISIL has also sought alliances with other al-Qaeda networks. And they're joining forces. And like I said, al-Qaeda, their time is pretty much up. Every time someone hears the word al-Qaeda, the American people, the people in Europe, there's no fear anymore. So they had to create a new terrorist organization, which is 10 times worse. So they created the Islamic State. So now you're going to see Al-Qaeda, Islamic State come together, and before you know it, we will just hear all these tribes now being called the Islamic State, and we need to go after them. Now, what's very interesting is, like I always said, the goal is to get into Syria. And why? Because they want the entire country. They want to block the contracts that Syria has with Russia. They want the natural resources. They want to prop the dollar up by putting all the natural resources on the dollar, then eventually go into Iran. But what's very interesting about this is that the Syrian National Coalition has urged, and this is the Free Syrian Army, the army that the United States didn't back, but they back now because they lied to us, and we knew they lied, but they back this army that is fighting Assad. They are calling for airstrikes inside Syria. We call on the international community to use the American Air Force or those of any other country to support the Free Syrian Army. In the name of humanity, I call on the United Nations and all countries which believe in freedom, starting with the United States, to take action in Syria the same way as it did in Iraq. The causes are the same, the enemy is the same, and double standards should not apply, said the leader of the Syrian opposition group. So you can see what's happening. The United States, their plan is to follow the Islamic State to all these countries because we have to follow the terrorists. And we can see this is why they're in Syria. This is why they're pushing into Libya, Lebanon, Yemen, and going to North Africa. Because think about it, who's in North Africa? China. So they want to bring the military in here, and the playbook is the same. They're using terror to bring the forces in, and you can see how this is starting to play out now. Now, of course, the Islamic State wants to go into all these countries, and already the United States has travel warnings in Algeria. The State Department said Americans face the prospect of abduction or bombings in Algeria in the latest travel advisory. So they're warning Americans not to go there. And we're going to see more of these warnings occur across northern Africa. Now, it looks like in Liberia with Ebola, gunmen pretty much raided the hospital and the Ebola patients fled. Now, they're being hunted down. But this is very scary because now we have people who are infected running around Liberia. And now, of course, they're saying that any people coming out of these countries need to be screened before they leave, and this should be mandatory because if any of these people get on a plane or sneak onto a plane and leave the country, go into Europe or go to the United States, then Ebola will be spreading. So it seems like, and of course, local witnesses told the France press that there were armed men among the group that attacked the clinic. They broke down the doors, looted the place. The patients all fled. Up to 30 patients were at the center, and they fled at the time of the raid. Now, it seems like this was completely set up, and it was meant for them to escape because we're seeing that this is continually spreading throughout Africa, and it is getting worse, and it seems like they can't contain this at this time. Now, with Islamic State, we see the propaganda continuing from Britain with Prime Minister Cameron. He's out there saying that the Islamic State fighters sweeping across Syria and Iraq are a direct threat to Britain, and the country must use all tools available to halt their advance. Cameron said that while it would not be right to send an army into Iraq, some degree of military involvement was justified due to the threat that was expanding. Now, of course, government officials always say that, we don't want to use armed forces, but they wait until that certain event. Then they say, listen, I didn't want to do it, but here we go, we have to. And they do this on purpose to make it seem like they really don't want to do this. But they know what's coming. This has all been planned. And yes, the UK will be joining in, the same with other private Western central banks in Europe that will be joining in to the war, because we understand that the central bankers, the entire system is collapsing right in front of us, and it is not going to be able to sustain this. The debt levels in these countries are high, unemployment is high, Europe is entering a depression. Some countries are already in a depression. Other countries are just starting to feel the recession coming on. The United States, the manipulated numbers and the real economy are starting to separate. They realize this. Fannie Mae is already saying that real estate is going to be declining as we go further into the year. So we can see it's all starting to fall apart, and they realize this. and they need to really hype up what's coming. Now, their whole thing is control. They need control of the United States, and they need an event. They need a war. So there's a lot on the plate right now for the central bankers, and we can see them turning up the heat right now because we see what's happening in Ferguson. We see what's happening across in the Middle East. We see the propaganda against Russia, and this is going to continue and get worse and worse as time goes on. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.